We're talking NC State football today. The season opener is a couple of days away for the Wolfpack, and they open the season with East Carolina, who they faced in the bowl game last year. I have my guy, Jake McSwain, with me today to discuss the game, what it means to the season. And Jake, before we get started on the season impact of this game, NC State did fare well against East Carolina last year in the first matchup. Your thoughts on how important it is for NC State to maybe first, before you even look at the season, get over that and use this game as a way to kind of put last season and that 6 and 7 year behind them.
Oh yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, like the optics of it all matters almost more than anything. So you can talk about it in two ways. Like one, does it put some extra pressure on the game? I would say sure. Like it definitely puts extra pressure on the game because if you're NC State, you just can't lose to ECU 2 times in a row, especially not in back-to-back games. But with that being said, do I think it actually translates? Like, is anyone worried inside the program because of what happened last year? That answer for me is no. I don't think anybody's concerned or overly worried because they got beat last year. If anything, I think it adds maybe a little bit of spark or an edge to some of the guys that were there to experience that. But I just don't see it carrying over. What do you think, James?
I don't. To me, man, I think these bowl games in general have become, I don't want to say a joke. That's offensive to people who are playing in them. But I don't think teams take them too serious. You know, you look at this last game for NC State, and I don't want to say teams. I think some take them more serious than others. But for instance, last year with NC State, the Wolfpack went into that bowl game, and you had multiple players sitting out. You had Tony Gibson, no longer defensive coordinator. So you had Freddie Archer-Lindsey as an interim defensive coordinator. You had Isaiah Moore as an interim linebackers coach. You had different players playing that are not going to be involved this year. So I don't personally feel like it's a big deal for this upcoming season outside of it should be a motivational factor for NC State. And that is where I'm going to it in terms of being a positive for NC State is regardless of who was on the team last year or not, Dave Doeren and his staff can use that as a motivational tool for the upcoming game. And they can use it as a way to get their guys locked in because I don't know how locked in NC State was for that game against East Carolina. There was a lot going on. You know, you had players opting out, as we know. Obviously, you go and look back. You didn't have Kevin Concepcion, for instance, in that game who opted out as soon as the season was over. So you had players opting out. I don't know how that impacts teams moving forward. I mean, that's a totally different dynamic than we have had in previous years. It used to be when you opt out, it was only for, you know, if you're going pro. So it was a very, very small number. Now you're looking at going into bowl games with 10, 15, 20 different players already in the transfer portal and not playing for you. And so it just changes the dynamic. And so I think for State, though, where you can circle it back and maybe use it as fuel this year is the loss. And I'm not as concerned with it because I think it's just a totally different environment as well. A bowl game, neutral site game, late December. Who knows how many fans are showing up? This is going to be the season opener for both teams in Raleigh. NC State fans hadn't seen football in over 9 months. You have to think that crowd is going to be a major advantage for them. So I think that part of it is going to be a big reason why I have NC State favored to win this game relatively comfortably.
Yeah, and I'll say the one area in which I think it could play a factor is that you have a group of guys in ECU that have that belief that they can beat NC State, like they've tasted it and experienced it. So it's almost like in games like this, it's always important. And I don't want to overhype it up just for this one particular matchup with ECU, but getting off to a quick start in the game itself and kind of crushing that early or getting past that a little bit earlier, because if you let them stick around, you know, and then they're hanging in there by the third quarter, that's when it can start to snowball and balloon as far as like them having some juice and momentum because they feel like, man, we've been there. We know we can do it and we can do it again. So I feel like for State, if you can squash that early, then it's absolutely zero impact from there.
Well, if you're NC State, the next question I have for you and the next topic we want to go to is how important is winning this football game? Look, I think it's very important. And we know Dave Doeren here at NC State, he's had a lot of success in season openers, specifically at home. He's had a ton of success. And I think this is a game where if you're NC State, you have to feel like, okay, we need to win this one. We got to get this one because not only is it a rival for a lot of NC State fans, which is another topic we can debate, you know, ad nauseum if it is not for most, but also, when you look at it from NC State's perspective, this schedule is not easy. And so if you fall behind losing a game where you're a double-digit favorite right out the gate, that's not an optimistic outcome for the rest of the season for NC State.
No, I mean, and it's a tough one because you talk about like a must win for a season, and I don't think NC State's a team that like has the national title aspirations. So if you drop this game, like it doesn't affect you in the ACC, it doesn't really affect, where you want to go in the season. I mean, it does, but not to the extent that you think it might. But from every other part of how you run a football program, this game is monumental. One, because imagine if you drop this game if you're NC State, just how pessimistic this fan base is going to be rolling into week 2. Like you talk about a miserable week on the IPS boards like that. I might just not even check it out between Thursday and the following Saturday. It's going to be rough, and then that impacts recruiting and just so many things. So you got to win.
100%. Like I said, I think it's just as big of a deal though for the schedule. When you look at NC State's schedule, this is one of those rare years where out of conference, I thought State really challenged themselves. You have East Carolina, you have Virginia being played this year as a non-conference game, and then you travel to Notre Dame. So the one kind of quote-unquote layup you have is Campbell, but that's mid-season. And so for State, man, it's you get going right away with ECU, Virginia, Wake Forest, Duke, Virginia Tech. I mean, that's 5 legitimate programs. So you don't have a lot of spots, in my opinion, where you're going to look at NC State's schedule and say, hey, they're a double-digit favorite. And so when you have those, Jake, you're a basketball guy. What's the old saying? You got to make your layups, right?
Yeah, got to get the bunnies, man. Like those have to be like you got to capitalize on those.
Yeah, and if you're State and you consider a game where you're an 11-point, 12-point favorite, I know a lot of people don't. Some people have NC State losing this game. I'm sure East Carolina fans think they should be favored, maybe that they should win, all those different things. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is NC State's a double-digit favorite in this game at home for a season opener. And you've got coming back a lot of your weapons on offense. There's no real reason you should lose this football game. And if you do, it's not an optimistic outcome when you're looking at the rest of the season for NC State. It really isn't.
No. And do you think it's important in that NC State not just win, but do you think there's a level of importance among the fan base for how NC State would win this game potentially?
There always is. Everybody looks at the schedule. I mean, you go back to 2022 when NC State played this game against East Carolina. I want to say State led by 2 touchdowns at halftime and controlled it comfortably. East Carolina got hot a little bit late, closed it, had a chance to win it with a field goal. They didn't. But NC State ended up winning it, I think 22-21, something along those lines in Greenville. And it felt like, and it still feels like it when anybody brings that game up, NC State lost. Right? It feels like a lot of NC State fans act as if NC State lost that game. So clearly, I think the optics matter. And I know I'm one who I think if you're NC State, you need to step back a little bit and have some perspective on this team because you're dealing with 2 different dynamics, I think. You're dealing with a young quarterback who is still a young quarterback, regardless of what you think with C.J. Bailey. He's a true sophomore quarterback. And you're dealing with a defense that's added a lot of new pieces. So kind of trying to project it out to the rest of the year, it's hard to do because I think this is a team that should have some growth on both sides of the ball. And so I think even if you're State, yeah, you want to go and cover the spread. You want to win by 3-4 scores. You want to do all those different things. The objective needs to be winning the football game, right? That's the objective. And you need to do so with the understanding that this first game isn't necessarily the end-all be-all to your season. Now, and I know we've talked about losing it and its impact, but we need to look at it from a win standpoint too. I mean, you want an example of that? Jake, go to 2019. I think NC State opened with East Carolina at home. I want to say they won that game 35-6. Man, and hey, won 35-6 against East Carolina at home. Well, that was, in my opinion, the worst team Dave Doeren has had at NC State. They went on to finish, 4-8, I think, that year, struggled and blown out frequently. So that 35-6 win wasn't an indication at all of the rest of the season for NC State. And so win or lose, it doesn't have to be. I just think you're probably on board with me too that this is a game and a spot where if you're a team that is going to make a lot of noise this year, it's one you don't want to look at and lose early, because you feel like when you look at the rest of State's schedule, there's a lot of games left that are, in my opinion, potential stumbling blocks.
Yeah, and I think there's really two areas too where it's important to me. One, we've talked about the schedule and how it sets up. Yeah, you challenge yourself out of conference, and there aren't as many quote unquote cupcakes on the schedule, but you're set up to really have a good start this year if you can capitalize on it, and then things get tough. So it's like if you want to have a season where you're getting some hype, where things are rolling along and you can have some success recruiting, like this is the year to do it, and you have to start off early. But and I think with Dave Doeren teams, where I've come to the point now is there's a lot of times where State would start off. So I think a couple of years back when we started off at UConn, a game I went to, took a trip with some friends and went to, and you kind of left that game after hearing, they're going to play fast, they're going to do this, and it didn't show up on the field. And I was one of the guys beating the drum of, okay, maybe they're saving stuff because I think they have Clemson week 4, and then they weren't saving stuff. And then last year I think I was the same way, and it gets to a point where you're like, well, I want to see it early, and I want people to be in that rhythm, because you can't count on having to pull that out of a hat when you need to. So that's something where I think, again, you're set up for a good run early before things get exponentially harder. And I think State just has to capitalize on that at some point.
Yeah, they need to. And this is a schedule that is front loaded for NC State in terms of win opportunities. And so that's another reason why a fast start is imperative. I mean, when you look at it, the first 6 games of the schedule, NC State doesn't leave the state of North Carolina. They play 4 games at home. They play 2 games on the road, 1 in Durham against Duke, 1 at Winston-Salem. I think objectively you would say State should be favored in 5 out of those 6 games. So if you're NC State, you need to say, at minimum, we should come out of this first 6-game stretch 5-1. Like, that has to be the focal point for you. Now, again, they want to be 6-0, and I think they can be 6-0. But when you get to that 6th game and you're talking about Notre Dame and at Pitt, at Notre Dame, Georgia Tech at home, at Miami, Florida State, North Carolina at home, those are all games that you would label either potential losses or 50-50 games. And so that's another reason why this East Carolina game is critical, because you have a 6-game window here where you, in my opinion, if you're going to win 7, 8, 9, 10 games this year, it all begins with starting fast, because that's where your easier opportunities appear to be on paper.
Yeah. Then that's kind of my point. I mean, you said it in a much better way than me, but if you want to win 9, 10 games this year, then a bulk of them have to come in this first stretch, because, like, to your point, you're tossing up. I mean, you're coin flipping a few of those games on paper, the majority of them at least. So it's going to be big time important for NC State to get off to a really fast start.
It is. I think NC State has a chance to get off to a fast start this year with this upcoming game on Thursday against East Carolina. So we wanted to talk about this matchup. It's just a couple of days away. We know NC State didn't fare well in the bowl game, but they have an opportunity at home in front of their crowd to make a statement this year against the Pirates.